Hi, folks. Sophia here. I'm going to something a bit different today. Somebody I've wanted to interview for a long while. Actually, not interview is not really the right word. To have a chat with and completely geek out because this person runs one of those channels which talks primarily about Doctor Who, but other stuff. And she's also trans. And well, Vera, do you want to tell people what you do, where you do it, why you do it, who you are?
Oh boy, I'll try and keep this short. So, my name's Vera Wylde. That's one of several names I actually go by. I run multiple YouTube channels. The biggest one being Council of Geeks, which, as Sophia mentioned, talks most frequently about Doctor Who, but also covers all sorts of stuff: Star Wars, the MCU. DC movies and all sorts of things like that. I also have a channel under the name Vera Wylde where I talk about my life experiences as a gender fluid person. And as of July last year, so I'm a little over 6 months now, this has actually become how I how I make my living. This is my job now, which is wonderful. And I mean, I started doing it because I kind of needed an outlet. Like I'm a bit of a rambly, ranty person. And I mean, honestly, the Council of Geeks channel started out as scripted shorts. No one goes back that far to look at them. And I started doing the just me rambling to a camera thing as something to fill the space between seasons. But then after I burned through all my scripted stuff, I realized I rather enjoy just sitting in front of the camera and rambling for a bit. And so that kind of became the main format. And even after I started making some money on it, it wasn't enough to have it be my living. So it was largely something that I did out of the love of doing it because I enjoy the process. I enjoy the community I've been able to build on YouTube. And then when I was let go due to COVID in July, I made the plunge to try and actually have this cover my bills. And it barely does. It's tight, but I'm managing so far.
Cool. Well, I mean, I love your channel. Well, that's why I've got you on, haven't I? And I also love your Vera Wild Vera Wild channel. Almost said Vera Child. Sorry. Um, me and my brain farts. I was gonna. I saw recently a live stream. I obviously had to do some research for this uh, show, uh, and I saw a live stream you did with you were cosplaying as Wonder Woman, and do you know it's because of Linda Carter, The New Adventures of Wonder Woman, I knew I was trans.
Oh, wow.
I was watching it when I was a kid, right? And when she spun around, and the next day in the playground, I tried to spin around, and I hoped I turned into a woman.
Oh.
Of course, I didn't, and I was a bit disappointed. Also, it was a combination of that and Leela from Doctor Who, and I have met Louise Jameson. I believe it or not, it wasn't at it wasn't at a Doctor Who convention. I was at a Unite Against Fascism conference, and I had a whole panel of speakers, and I didn't recognize her first off. And then they said the next speaker is Louise Jameson, who played Lena in Doctor Who, and I went, what? Oh, oh, there she is. I actually spoke to her afterwards, and I did tell her, I said, I found out I was trans partly because of you. She was a bit taken aback, but she said she was glad that she inspired me.
It's funny. So many trans people have things that they can point to and be like, that's when I first knew, or that's when it became clear, or anything along those lines. I never really have those stories because my journey in regards to my gender is it's such a slow burn, and it's been so meandering that it's hard for me to mark too many milestones along the way, because it's just this very lazy wander. through my gender expression.
I have to say your videos on your Vera Wylde channel have actually have helped me. I used to be a bit like Blair White. I used to be a bit of a truth goer. You know, every time I see like India Willoughby on television having a, you know the usual truth scum trope, which is the trans umbrella is too wild. It's all these non-binary and gender fluid and gender non-conforming people who are you know fucking things up for real trans women. And I know where that comes from. It comes from, you know, when I came out, I was very, very insecure. You know, you're gonna be, you know, because I knew that everyone was going to try and, you know, make me have to validate my identity. And, you know, one way of doing that is for some trans people to throw others under the bus.
That's part of it. I think another aspect of that is, to be fair, there are more than a few people outside the trans community who look at someone like me or someone non-binary, or heck, if they're really out of touch, they look at a drag queen and then talk to a trans person and be like, oh, you're like this. And the having your identity conflated with something that you are not, and you know you're not, and having people that you are trying to get to just accept you get you muddled with or confused with, or are making you answer questions about people with completely different experiences than you. It's demoralizing and it's exhausting. And it's, I think, a fairly human thing to want to do something about that. And when the cis heteronormative society is the majority, you don't feel like you can do anything about them. And so some people will instead lash out at the people they're being compared to, as opposed to the people making the poor comparison. You know, so they'll say to a trans person, oh, you're like this person who says, well, sometimes I'm a man and sometimes I'm a woman. And that can understandably make a trans person upset. But for some, instead of pushing back on the cis person who made the comparison, they try and banish the person that they see as muddying the waters from the community.
I always remember when India Willoughby made a complete twat of herself on Celebrity Big Brother. One of the things that happened was when they sent the men into the house, because they were doing this sort of like commemoration. I don't know why Celebrity Big Brother of all shows was commemorating 100 years since women got the vote, but they were doing it. So the first week they had just women in the house, and obviously India was in it, and you know India is a woman. When they sent the men in, one of the men was a drag act called Courtney Axe from Australia. India walked up to her, up to them, sorry, and basically said, sorry, but I'm drag phobic. And I thought, that's like going up to a black person and saying you don't like N-words. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think a lot of it just has to do with wanting to feel like you can do something that will actually impact things. And it's easier to feel like you're impacting a smaller target. I mean, like, I can make the comparison to just how I go about my workday and my ADD. My brain gets much more satisfied doing a lot of small tasks that are finished quickly, and doing long-term projects is a lot harder for me and not nearly as satisfying in the process. It can feel rewarding to do something small that feels like it made an impact. And if you take the mentality that a lot of trans medicalists do, which is that people like me or non-binary people either just flat out aren't trans or aren't even what they claim to be in the first place and are somehow delusional or lying or doing it for attention, then it gives you in your head a blanket reason to not treat them with dignity, because you are presuming that they are presenting you with a lie just by being. And so for some people, that in their mind removes the obligation to treat them like a person because they have decided that they are instead interacting with a lie.
Yeah. Talking about people who accuse others of just being trans for attention, we have to talk about a certain true scum bigot, because you are the first person I've met who's been a subject of a Blair White video.
Yep. And that's, it will never stop being frustrating to me that the most viewed video on the internet with my face on it is the video that she decided to make about me. And that will probably always be the most viewed video because it has over 1 million freaking views. Yeah, that, I don't love that fact.
No, I mean, Blair White is, you know, whereas with, say, as I said, I've said into whatever, I think it is genuine insecurity. With Blair White, she has just built a career on shitting on other trans people. That's basically a stick. She just shits on other trans people, you know. And I mean, she's indirectly funded by the Koch brothers. You know, she writes for a blog called the Post Millennial, which is bankrolled by the Heritage Foundation, which in turn is funded by the Koch Foundation. So, you know, this is basically, she is a puppet of the anti-LGBTQ agenda, basically.
Well, I mean, like I try and be careful unless I can back it up with something that I've personally verified. I try not to psychoanalyze or delve too much into people's motives myself, just because that's what they often do to me. They try and figure out, well, you obviously can't be what you say you are, so why are you doing this? But like, it is incredibly frustrating how many people who are cis make up a huge portion of her audience and basically hold her up as the way a trans person is supposed to be. They are supposed to be passable. They are, and she holds all these views where she's not asking for protections on all this. Is, oh, so she's one of the good ones. Now, whatever her reasons for doing that, that is the image she's built, and it's a damaging one.
Well, there's a thing amongst us Jews called the fallacy of the good Jew, which was there were Jews in Nazi Germany who went along with the Nazis thinking that they wouldn't get the worst of the persecution. Obviously, that didn't happen. You know, they wound up, you know, being killed. And there are the likes of Blair and Rose of Dawn, who's the British version of Blair White, who have fallen for this fallacy. They seem to think that they go along with the far right establishment, you know, but you know, they won't, you know, get thrown under the bus by them. Well, they will. They, you know, if ever the far right you know, got a foot, well, they already have in the United States, unfortunately, but you know, essentially, eventually, you know, they would round on all LGBTQ people, and it doesn't matter how much you've sucked up to them in the past.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is an observation borrowed from Innuendo Studios, but the people who are willing to do the kind of work that Blair does is very useful to certain political movements who will back her. But if they ever get the various phases of what they want, if they were ever able to really pass a ton of legislation against trans people in the US and really lock that down, they wouldn't need her anymore. And again, the observation from Innuendo Studios is it's last hired, first fired. So she would be discarded, and then it would be people like Milo Yiannopoulos and the homosexual people who had pushed for this stuff. They would be discarded because they no longer serve utility. Well,
just a couple of days before the presidential election, I went through with the trans record on LGBTQ rights with a streamer on Twitch called Elenani Clark, and you know, I'm very obviously as someone who's Jewish, I'm very well versed in what the Nazis did, and people seem to think as soon as Hitler came to power, the Nazis started killing Jews. No, first of all, they used the law to take away all Jews' legal rights and exclude them from society, right? When Nell and Arnie started going through Trump's record, I had this really creepy feeling coming up my spine of horror. I saw parallels. I did. And if he had been re-elected, you know, it wouldn't have been long before LGBTQ people would have been ordered to wear a pink triangle in public. I am not kidding. That's the way it was going. I'm not being alarmist.
I mean, I hadn't even realized how much of a weight I had been carrying for the last 4 years until it was clear that he was not going to be reelected. And to feel that lifted, like, I didn't know what I was carrying until it was gone. And of course, like, it's not gone completely because the vast majority of the apparatus and the elements that brought him into power are still in play. So, like, it's not like it's completely gone, but that made a huge, huge difference just for my own ability to function day to day.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I would say, unfortunately, because you're gender fluid, you're probably more prone to the abuse. Because there are trans women who have passing privilege, can sink into the background. If you're gender fluid or gender non-conforming, you're not so able to do that. I mean, I don't have passing privilege, so I know what it's like, right?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways I'm very fortunate. I've actually, despite having been publicly presenting as either feminine or sort of mixed gendered presentation for about 16 years now to varying degrees, I've yet to be directly confronted in person. I mean, there's nonsense that's happened online, obviously, but and I know that I'm incredibly fortunate for that. And I know that part of that has to do with the fact that, honestly, I'm white, so I enjoy a certain amount of privilege based on that. And also it's part of why I moved back to Vermont, because if there was a state mentality to Vermont, it's
Bernie
my
Sanders.
my neighbor's business is not my business. Like, there is a reason that Vermont was the first state to pass civil unions. It didn't pass actual gay marriage, but it was the first state to do the step before that happened, because ultimately Vermonters don't really care what their neighbor gets up to.
I mean, I've been to New Hampshire, and they seem to have that sort of attitude as well.
New Hampshire's a little bit more aggressive about it. I mean, like, their state motto is live free or die.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say they don't have a similar mentality, but like, it's aggressive about it. And it makes me kind of go, I'm going to hop back on the other side of the Connecticut River. Thank you very much.
I knew a few libertarians out there. And I'm not a libertarian, I'm on the left, but I flirted with libertarianism for a while. And I went to a party there, but it was like, I mean, this country, every time there's like 2 flakes of snow, the country grows a hole. But obviously you live up there, the northeast of the United States, the Canadian border. So you come over here and see our snow, and you'll think, what? Everyone's panicking about this. This is light. This is like light. 10-foot snow drifts in fucking New Hampshire. As I went to a party, and before I got to the porch, and it's like this fucking freezing cold. 2 people had offered me a beer, and 3 people had offered me a joint.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Welcome to Northern New England.
Yeah, you're gender fluid now. I wanted to ask someone who, as I said, I've watched your videos on your Vera Wylde channel, and I find them very, very touching. I think you come over very, very sweet. And as I said, I have been a true scummer in the past, and there are still, unfortunately, true scummers, as we've discussed. Would you like to tell people why the term transvestite is really outmoded?
Well, I can give the reasons that I personally never adopted it and have always kind of avoided it. A lot of it, honestly, just has to do with just the way it lands on my ear. It feels like a diagnosis. It sounds like a term out of a medical book. And it also removes, if you try to apply transvestite to someone like me, it removes the entire element of your actual gender identity from the conversation, because the term transvestite only reflects your mode of dress and does not in any way bring into play your headspace, your sense of self, your identity. And as much as I love her, it does frustrate me that Eddie Izzard used the term to identify herself for as long as she did, because I suspect in some areas that's part of why it's continued to have a popularization, despite the fact that it just sounds like an old, outdated medical textbook term, and it's never landed right on my ear. I don't mind crossdresser as much, even though functionally it means the same thing, but there's just something softer about the word that I'm more okay with. And I even, like, before identifying as gender fluid, I identified as a crossdresser. I identified as a cisgender crossdresser, which I don't anymore. But and it doesn't help that in many ways transvestite is a term that can add to the confusion, because a shortening of that you would think is trans. I'm like, well, then it's the same shortening as transgender, and like, but it's not the same dang thing. So it's always weird to me when people like Blair or Blair's audience want to label me with the term transvestite, when just that wording is way closer to what she does not want me to be able to say that I am than the word I'm using. It's very strange to me.
Well, Blair might be beautiful on the outside, but she's ugly inside. That's the way I see it. I was going to say about Blair, I mean, Truscum originally meant transmedicalist. However, I think it's sort of the definition that's broadened to basically mean trans people who are bigoted to other trans people for not being trans enough. That's kind of how it's sort of become now. But
not being trans enough, or being trans the wrong way.
Yeah. I was going to say about Blair and the whole transmedicalist thing, of course, she's a hypocrite, because she goes about how, unless you can't be trans unless you have gender dysphoria and you're seeking medical intervention. And yet she hasn't had bottom surgery.
See, like I wasn't even aware of that, because it's one of those things, like my actual exposure to Blair is fairly limited by choice, as well as to people like her. That is a little odd. I'll tell you that it was both slightly cathartic and frustrating towards the end of last year, when she took the huge hit to her credibility when she did the video about the trans athlete,
Marie Kroc.
Thank you.
Who's very, very sweet, by the way.
Who I couldn't remember the name off the top of my head, but when Blair did that video, and it was so immediately, provably, factually wrong on almost every single point she made, it was rewarding to see that called out on the scale that it was. It was rewarding to see her take as big a hit to her subscriber numbers and her view counts as she did. But a part of me also was sitting back going, yeah, you people are coming in and taking her apart for this. You didn't do anything months before when she did almost the exact same freaking thing to me. Nobody gave a damn.
But the worst thing she did wasn't Janine Marie Kroc. The only and I'll explain. The only reason she took that video down is because Janine Marie Kroc threatened her with legal action. Because Blair, and the bottom line with Blair is her bottom line. Okay, that's it's money. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, and then of course she gave that half-assed apology on Twitter we're basically trying to play the victim, saying, I've been overworked, I haven't had the time to do proper research. Fuck off. You've done
It's your job. This is what you do for a living.
Yeah, but it's not the first time she's done it. Debbie Jackson, I would advise you after we've done this to go and check out Debbie Jackson, spelled with D-E-B-I. Who's a mother of a trans child. And she gave one of the most touching speeches I've ever heard from a parent of a trans child, right? And this is somebody who was, a conservative, a Southern Baptist, who basically knew there was something wrong with her child, and when she did the research, she found out her child was trans. Basically, Blair made out that Debbie had brainwashed her child into thinking they were trans, when that was completely false, absolutely false. And in fact, Blair showed a link in her video, in the video she did on Debbie Jackson, which included, and if she'd followed that fucking link, she would have got to that fucking speech. That's the thing. I'd also suggest people, if you want the comprehensive, video on Blair's lies, go and check out Hunter Avalon's video, because in 10 minutes he basically concisely sums up Blair for what she is. Anyways, enough of this. Let's geek out. Though I do want to, obviously, one of the most recent videos is about Gina Carano.
Gina Carano.
Gina Carano, sorry. Can I just say as a joke, I think she's an anti-Semitic piece of shit.
I mean, you being a Jewish person, me not, I am not in a position to critique your view of that. I'm not comfortable making that call myself, but I'm certainly not going to give you pushback for labeling her as such.
Yeah.
And when I say I'm not comfortable, it's not like I'm going to defend her and say, no, she's definitely not. It's just that I feel too distanced from the topic to feel comfortable being the one to slap the label on, if that makes sense.
But a couple of things I'd mention, right? You're right. Well, Disney only did it because it was going to hurt their bottom line. And as you said, she wouldn't shut the fuck up. That was a problem. Yeah. And also, oh shit, I just lost my train of thought there. I'll come back to me. Sorry.
Well, here's something that I can say that was kind of interesting, because a lot of people
that was it. Sorry, I've got it now.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Basically, because the news came out that Ben Shapiro is going to go make a movie with her, and I thought,
oh yeah.
Ben Shapiro, who is somebody I absolutely detest, because in fact, actually, he's done a video with Blair, and I thought, well, they're two peas in the same pod, because Blair goes around saying, you're not trans enough, you're not trans enough, you're not doing trans right, and Ben goes around saying, you're a plastic Jew, you're a plastic Jew, you're a plastic Jew because you're a Democrat, because you're LGBTQ. You don't follow the Jewish tradition. The thing is, right, the only thing which determines that you're a Jew is if your mother's Jewish. That's it. You don't have to be circumcised. You can you can have a foreskin full of knob cheese. You can eat, you don't have to eat kosher. You can stuff bacon sandwiches down your gullet as much as you want. You don't have to practice Judaism. It's just that if your mother was Jewish at the time of your birth, you're Jewish. That's it, right? And he knows this, but he's now trying to be the king of the Jews to arbitrate who's Jewish and who's not, and it really pisses me off. Plus, there is not an anti-Semite he seems unwilling to get into bed with. He defended the Proud Boys, who are anti-Semitic. Now he's making movies with Gina Carano, who, in my estimations, is an anti-Semitic piece of shit. So at least Gina Carano has exposed Ben Shapiro more for what he fucking well is.
Well, here's what's funny. Some of the things that went on in the comment section on that video. Because yes, I do moderate the ever-loving heck out of my out of my comment section because I have to if I don't want them to turn into an utter hellhole. So there were two things that were brought up, one less frequently than the other, but both of which made me go, eh. There were a few people that brought up the fact that she's now cut a deal to be in a movie that Ben Shapiro is going to produce, which, first of all, anyone who is touting that as, see, her career is going to be fine. I'm like, the last movie that the Daily Wire was the distributor on, which they've only done with one other movie, was released to their own website behind a paywall. I'm sorry, that's lower than Pure Flix as far as a career move goes. And additionally, people were going, how can she be anti-Semitic if Ben Shapiro hired her? I'm like, okay, first of all, this is literally just, I can't be racist, I have a black friend.
Yeah.
Is what you're tossing out there.
Yeah.
So like that, what? And that's aside from the fact that I never said she was anti-Semitic in the video. And I even replied to that. I'm saying, okay, at this point, since I never brought up whether or not I thought she was anti-Semitic, you seem to be arguing against somebody else's video altogether. I don't even know what you're doing. The other thing that came up a lot in the comments, because as you mentioned, my major point in that video was that ultimately the reason she was let go was not because of the substance of anything that she said or appeared to believe. It was the fact that she kept making bad headlines over and over and over and over again. And some people tried to do this whataboutism argument, bringing up something that Pedro Pascal had said a few years ago. And I don't even know the exact quote. I didn't look it up because it didn't matter. And I'll say why it didn't matter. But something that he said to the effect, making a comparison between Trump supporters and the Nazi party. And people saying, well, he said this, isn't that just as bad? I'm like, okay, first of all, even if he said that, and even if he said it the way you're saying he did, which given the bad faith, a lot of these comments came in, I'm hesitant to believe. But even if that is the case, it does nothing to undermine the point I'm making because he caused a stir once. She kept doing it over and over. And it's not about whether the comments were equivocal. It's about the fact that she generated multiple bad press headlines. He generated at most one, and I don't even think it was a headline at the time when he said that, outside of things like Breitbart. Whereas she was making mainstream headlines. It's always so weird to me when people try and disprove me by bringing up something that actually proves my point.
Yeah, I was going to say there's now a campaign to have her role replaced by Lucy Lawless.
I mean, they're going to do what they want to do. I suspect Disney just will drop the character because the character is not integral enough that she has to be kept around for the lore to work or for the story to progress or whatever. They'll just stop using her.
I'd say for Lucy Lawless, obviously she has had a go at Kevin Sorbo for being anti-LGBTQ. Of course, her co-star from Xena, and I will give look. It's funny. I went back to watch Xena when it was on Netflix a few years ago, and it doesn't hold up as much as as we thought it was in the 1990s. However,
it's a campy show and your mileage will vary.
Yeah, but the one thing I will say about Xena in the 1990s, it went against the grain in the sense that you had a strong female lead in a sci-fi / fantasy show who wasn't heteronormative.
Yeah,
and that was in the 1990s. That was definitely against grain. However, the point I'm trying to make is, this campaign to get Lucy Lawless, Disney to hire Lucy Lawless. I've got a better suggestion. There's another actress from Down Under who I think would be appropriate for the role. You want to have any guesses?
I will probably be wrong and embarrass myself with how few actors from that part of the world I can name off the top of my head. So just let me know.
You're going to kick yourself when I say the name. You are. Claudia Black.
Oh.
Who played Aaron's song in Farscape.
Oh, I'm well aware.
And it would be the perfect revenge for what Gina Carano said, because Claudia Black's Jewish. And she was also in Pitch Black, which is the only Riddick film I'd suggest people see.
Oh, likewise. The sequels to Riddick were so frustrating.
But
Although
the Chronicles of Riddick is just, well, it's just shit. Riddick, the last one, it was all right, but it's a bit sexist. Shall we just say?
Here's my thing with the movies that follow Pitch Black. I'll actually slightly defend the animated film that came out, Dark Fury, which is about 40 minutes long and actually not too bad. And I'm also a little bit of an animation nut, so I really like the styling in it. But Chronicles of Riddick, like, very clearly had no proper understanding of what people liked about this character. So they took this morally ambiguous murderer from a horror film and basically turned him into Conan the Barbarian in space. It was so weird and made no sense, and the lore was ridiculous. Now, the third one is kind of interesting to me because the third one feels like it. So I mentioned the animated short. The third movie feels like they took 3 things that were supposed to be short films about Riddick and just did them back to back to back and called it a movie. Because there's 3 incredibly distinct sections to that movie. There's the first one where he's alone on the planet, and this is also the best section. There's the first one where he is alone on the planet trying to survive. Yeah. There is almost no dialogue. It's visual storytelling. He creates a bond with one of the creatures he comes across there. It's actually really good. Then there's the second section, which is basically a horror movie perspective on him because it has mercenaries come down and land, and he starts picking them off, but it's all from their perspective. So from their perspective, there's this thing in the dark that is killing them. And that is also decently done. Like, hard gear shift from the first. There's a hard gear shift for each of these. And then the third section is basically just a remake of Pitch Black and is the weakest of the 3. But Riddick is a weird movie.
Yeah, I'd agree. The first section I thought, well, when he was on his own, surviving on that desolate planet, that was the best part of
that stuff's gold. I love that part, but obviously they decided they can't make the whole movie like that, and the weird segmenting of where they went after that was just so strange.
Did you know that Vin Diesel was a huge D&D fan?
Oh yeah, I knew that. Yeah. And his career has been so weird. Have you ever seen the old videos of him promoting Street Sharks?
No.
Toys? So these would be from the 90s. And even back then, he had his deep voice and his big burly build, and he's got these overly muscled mutated shark toys. And he's like, oh, it's so awesome. It's one of the most ridiculous things you will ever see. And yet feels absolutely perfect because he does it with such enthusiasm. I'm like, I'm not even sure you're acting. I think you're really having that much fun playing with those toys.
Yeah.
I do love what a big nerd he is.
I'll tell you what's a good. I mean, I like to pretend I'm a serious film buff. I mean, I remember I once nearly got into a fight with someone at a barbecue, in a debate about which Kubrick film was better, Barry Lyndon or The Shining. It's Barry Lyndon, by the way. Okay, I'm a Kubrick nut. Okay,
Kubrick is a minefield topic with me, because while I can admire what he does, I only enjoy 2 of his movies, and I think The Shining is just a flat out bad film. So,
well, a lot of people think Barry Lyndon is boring, and I said, well, it's meant to be sort of. That's kind of the point to it, actually.
I never actually got around to that one because, like, by that point, I'd worked through enough of his filmography. I'm like, I usually don't connect with this guy. So, like, I do enjoy Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah.
And I don't enjoy it as much now, but I did see Clockwork Orange at the absolute perfect point in my life, which was when I was about 20. And at the time thought it was amazing because if you're about 20 and trying to be slightly cool or slightly edgy, it was the Fight Club of its day in terms of who it was appealing to. So, but rewatching it again as a more grown person, I am a little bit like, I still think it's a good movie though. But The Shining, I I feel like every time I try and have a conversation with people about why they think it's good, they always bring up how meticulous it is and all the behind the scenes work that he did and, how many takes and how precise everything was. I'm like, I don't care how precise your technical aspect is. Is the movie any good? And I feel on that one, it's definitively no.
Well,
it's not.
The thing with Kubrick was that, he was very meticulous, especially about the technical stuff. I mean, Barry Lyndon is one of the most beautifully shot films you'll ever see. Okay, it really is. That's why I love it. Right? It's not my all-time favorite film. That's Apocalypse Now, followed by Brazil. But the thing about Kubrick, everything was meticulous, but he allowed actors to improvise. Take it you've seen Full Metal Jacket.
About half of it.
Right. Well,
but I know that Arlie Ermy or whatever his name is, most of his stuff. Yeah, most of his stuff he wrote himself because he was actually a drill sergeant.
Yeah.
I did know that.
Well, the story was that there was another actor who was supposed to do that role, and Lee Emery was his consultant. And after a few days, Kubrick just went, "Oh fuck it, get Lee Emery to do it," because that was his job, and that was all improvised. Also, "Here's Johnny" in The Shining, famously known for that was improvised.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm super picky about whether or not I'm okay with improvisation in film, and I actually make a very clear distinction. I'm okay with ad-libbing. I'm not okay with improvisation, and here's the distinction that I will make. Things like the "Here's Johnny" or Arlie Emery, they are ad-libbing because the structure of the scene has been determined and is clear. There is a clear thing that is supposed to happen in the scene. It's just the words that they choose to do it with. They are using their own words. They're ad-libbing the lines, but the scene has a structure and a flow and a purpose. What I cannot stand, I hate to my core, is the crap that Judd Apatow does with movies like The 40-Year-Old Virgin and Knocked Up and all of the things that ever took inspiration from anything he ever did. You can tell the entire scene was improvised. They basically sat down and went, "Here's the character in this scene. You guys wing it. We'll figure out in the edit." And I hate that so much because it means the overall film has no structure because the scene has no purpose because you let the actors wing way, way, way too much. That level of improvisation, no matter what the humor is in the individual scene, destroys the overall structure of the film because his movies are insufferable to me.
Yeah, of course, we should remember in Clockwork Orange, the score was written by Wendy Carlos, who's trans.
Mm-hmm.
I actually remember the first time I ever did acid. Someone told me if you watch the Stargate scene in 2001, there's some subliminal message. Because I fell for this shit. Right? I was young, so I thought, okay, I took some acid when I was watching it. Of course,
that was always an interesting way to start a story. So this time that I did acid.
It was like that one about, if you play Sergeant Pepper backwards, there's meant to be some subliminal message for the devil. Yeah, your stylus is fucked. Your stylus is fucked. Your stylus is fucked.
Oh, goodness.
Well, I guess we're going to talk about Doctor Who.
Oh, yes. Let's go for that.
So the first time I think I came across your channel was when I'll explain. I used to know a guy called Goldsmith. I used to do podcasts with him, right? And this is in the days when I was flirting with libertarianism and I wasn't dealing with my gender dysphoria in the way I should be dealing with it. And but when I transitioned, around about 2012, there started to be talk about a female actor replacing Matt Smith. And I remember, I don't know if it was how long have your channel been going?
The channel it's been going since 2012, so I'm in my 9th year of doing this.
I think it was you were discussing, could the Doctor regenerate, into
the first video I ever made talking about the possibility of the Doctor becoming a woman. where I made an argument for why that should not happen. And that's
Well,
still
you
one of the
I'm
most viewed videos on my channel.
I'm just checking if it was you. Were you wearing a TARDIS sweatshirt?
Yep.
Yeah, it was your video. And I remember that's for the first time. So that was the first time I came across your channel, right? But I remember Gar, he was like he was like a hardcore Doctor Who, really into the mythology, and he was also a bit, well, I mean, he was meant to be an anarcho-capitalist, but he was a bit conservative, which is what a lot of anarcho-capitalists really are. And he started to get like, I said, what's the fucking problem? It's a sci-fi show. Yeah, but you go against the mythology, And of course, I said, well, okay, if Doctor Who, all the actors who have played Doctor Who are white, what if they regenerated to a black actor? Are you going to complain then? You did not like that.
Yeah, it's, what's funny? I leave that video up, even though it is no longer reflective of my current views, and was also from back in the day when I was presenting 100% masculine on the channel. But I leave it up in a lot of ways as a time capsule, because I feel like if you watch videos over the course, like if you feel like going back that far, but I can look at that versus stuff I did later and see the progression. And also that, like, the thing worth noting was at the time I did that video, that was during series 8, after the finale of series 8, when Missy was first introduced, because I realized, oh, if they're willing to do this with the Master, they will inevitably do it with the Doctor at some point. And so the thing was, I started processing my feelings and my assessment of the idea of a female Doctor years ahead of when it actually happened. So by the time Jodie Whittaker was cast, I had softened my position quite a bit. And then by the time she actually started playing the role, I didn't care anymore. Whereas I think part of the thing was a lot of Doctor Who fans refused to even sort of start to process the possibility until it had already happened. Whereas I felt like I had several years worth of working it over in my head behind me by the time it had actually come to pass. Now, that's not to say that I love Jodie Whittaker's era. I actually don't, but none of that's her fault.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Chibnall is a bit of a hack. I'm going to say it.
Here's the thing that I will say about Chibnall. I can appreciate the bird's eye view perspective of a lot of the stuff he does. And actually, even particularly in series 11, on paper, a lot of what he did was stuff that I had been saying Doctor Who should do, and is probably stuff that I would have done if I was the showrunner. Things like all self-contained episodes, no overarching story for the series, no returning enemies for a series. Things like that were what I would have said they should have done, and he did them, yet I still wasn't all that happy with the results. So the thing is, for me with him, I kind of wish he would let other people write the actual episode scripts, because I don't think any of the ones that he's penned only by himself have been great.
He didn't, okay, two things.
But I think there is merit to some of his overarching ideas. I just kind of wish he'd let somebody else actually write them.
I was going to say two things, right? So my favorite Doctor Who episode since the relaunch in 2005. Well, I have a guess.
Well, the popular answer would be Blink.
Right. As for the Chibnall area, it's the Rosa Parks episode.
I am overdue to revisit that, because at the time that it aired, there was stuff going on in this country that gave me a very pessimistic reading of that episode, which, while with most of my stuff, I stand by what I said at the time, may have been unfair. And I really should go back and try and watch that one again and give it a reassessment. My favorite one of the, since Chibnall has taken over, was Can You Hear Me? Which a lot of people didn't like for a lot of different reasons, but I absolutely love, because I love how deep and core the themes of battling depression are to that story across the board. And I thought it was fantastic, but I also like it. there's no story during Chibnall's era where I can look at it and go, why would anyone have a problem with that? Which honestly, I can look at something like Blink and go, if you have a problem with this, you shouldn't even be watching Doctor Who. Yeah. Like, what the heck? I don't understand how, like, if you want to say it's slightly overrated, fine. But like, I don't see how anyone could just say it's bad. But even the ones that I like in Chibnall's era, which are ones like Can You Hear Me or Demons of the Punjab or It Takes You Away, I do understand some of the reasons why Doctor Who fans would not like those episodes. So even what I consider to be the best of the Chibnall era still doesn't have the level of infallibility that the best of previous eras does.
The strange thing about Blink is obviously it was one of those episodes where the Doctor's actually not much in it. Yeah, but I do think this was Stephen Moffat at his best. It really was. It was just very, very good, and I'd also say the other thing I remember about Gart was when David Tennant left the show and there was the 2-part special. This was in the days before BBC America simulcast the Doctor Who, which they did for the 50th anniversary, of course. And so at 1 o'clock in the morning, I had to give him a rundown on the phone. He was recording all this of the 2-part special. It was New Year's Day. I was hungover like fuck. I had a banging headache. He wanted to know about it. I just remembered it was freezing fucking cold as well. I actually remember because he had a sponsor for his podcast, and he comes on it. It was actually a collections agency of all people. Sequel, I think it was called. And anyways, so we did it in 2 parts, and when we did the second part of it, which was he went away and had something to eat, and he came back and phoned me again. And I went on and I went, he went, we're back with a sponsor. And I went, yes, and I'm here with, due to Camel cigarettes and Pepsi Max. Just because he's expecting me to stay up to 3 o'clock in the fucking morning when I'm hungover, to talk Doctor Who. I mean, look, I think it's great that with Jodie Whittaker, I can't fault her performance. I think it's fine, right? But I do think the scripts have let them down. I did like the Dalek, the last Dalek, the one on New Year's Day.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with that.
That was better. I felt. But for me, the definitive Doctor Who is, and I hate to be unoriginal here, Tom Baker.
I mean, that's hard to fault. I mean, like,
I know Patrick Troughton's your favorite.
Well, of the classic era, him and Tom Baker kind of compete. The parts of the classic era that are tougher. Well, all right, talking just about the Doctors, because I do make a distinction between the performance of a Doctor and the era, because like I like John Pertwee a lot. I don't particularly love his era because of how earthbound it was and how much it started to feel like James Bond with all the gadgets and became a little action hero. But I love him in the part. The ones from classic that are hard for me, Hartnell can be tricky for me to clue into at times, and I still don't get Peter Davison. I just don't get it. I've just been trying forever to figure not to get it, because at this point I've kind of accepted that I won't, but just to figure out why I don't. And like Colin Baker's era is not good, but at least I've come to love him through Big Finish, so he got a reprieve that way. I mean, my favorite overall at this point, and it's changed multiple times, so don't assume that this will be the case forever and ever, but my favorite at this point is Capaldi.
Well, first of all, I was going to say of Peter Davison, ironically, and I'm not saying this sarcastically, it was the caves of, I can't pronounce it, caves of, can you?
Androzani.
Yeah, that's it. That his last serial that's actually his best, and not because it was his last. It was decent. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I remember rightly, was it written by Robert Holmes?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Robert Holmes wrote my all-time favorite. What for me personally is my all-time favorite Doctor Who serial, which is The Sunmakers, because it was actually very clever. It was a political commentary on Britain at the time. In the late 70s, Britain was a bit of a mess. And
as opposed to now.
Well, yeah, it's funny.
I'm sorry, that was kind of a cheap shot. I couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know Brexit and all that, but it's funny you mentioned that because there was two Doctor. Excuse me. During Pertwee's time, Doctor Who did actually get quite political in some of the stuff. There was a lot of eco sort of concerns, and also there was, I forgot the name of it, but there was one serial in particular which basically was a reflection of the UK joining what was then the EEC.
The Peloton ones. There was Monster Peloton and Curse of Peloton. Both of those were kind of reflective of that.
Yeah. The Green Death was obviously an eco concern. Funny enough, that because Barry Letts was a Buddhist, he was very sort of liberal in his views. So there was a lot of that during the Pertwee era. For me, I don't know, Tom Baker. He was just the Doctor to me. He was like the most alien of all the Doctors.
I mean, that's a big part of what I liked about him is that I like the Doctor to feel different from just a human, which is part of why I have a middling opinion of David Tennant, who's an excellent actor and is very good in the role. And I understand the choices that he made, but I find a lot of his responses to situations are very human, especially when compared to other Doctors. Tom Baker really did feel just as a person, and like still does, feel like he's from another planet. And he also starred in what is definitely my favorite of the classic era and competes for my favorite of all time, which is City of Death, which shouldn't be surprising because I fell in love with Douglas Adams long before I knew what the heck Doctor Who was. But I
remember that fucking Cyclops creature scaring the shit out of me when I was a kid. I look at it now and oh God, was I scared of that?
It's funny what scares you when you're young, but I love City of Death so much, and because for me it has an ideal balance of neat sci-fi concepts and wonderful character-based humor. And that's always the thing. If Doctor Who's going to be funny, it needs to be rooted in the characters, not a wacky situation. I mean, that's why stuff like Love and Monsters is incredibly painful. But if you can root it in just how he interacts with these people and responds to the people around him, he gets tossed in this room. He's like, what a delightful butler you have. He's so violent. I'm like, that's perfect. I love that.
Excuse me. I was going to say, Sunmakers and also Genesis of the Daleks. Genesis of the Daleks still hold, well, the production values don't hold up, but the story still holds up.
For the most part, it does. That's one of those ones that I find sort of nudging into the overrated area for a number of reasons. But again, like anytime I say that, you need to remember I came in on Classic Who having fallen in love with modern era Who first, and I was not of an age to be watching it when it was airing. So I'm on the younger side versus a lot of Classic Who fans. So, take my opinion on something like Genesis of the Daleks with a grain of salt. But it is very good. And there's definitely a lot of aspects about it that absolutely still hold up. There are a handful of things that I'm kind of like, but again, like, whenever I like do reviews or talk about these things, I try and not make it sound like I'm making too many declarative statements about like, this is definitely good or this is definitely bad, and more just try and explain, well, here's why I don't think it quite works. And then, so at the very least, if people disagree with me, they at least understand why I said the thing I said.
After Tom Baker is David Tennant for me. And I don't agree. I think there is a line, I forgot the actual line, but it's from School Reunion, where Rose says something to the Doctor, and he turns around and he says, "But I'm not human."
See, the thing, he says that, but for me, that feels like telling instead of showing, because he can say that and even deliver the line well, but I look at his actions. I look at what his core emotional response to things is, and I'm never surprised by it. It all feels like what it the vast majority of it, at least, feels like the same kind of reaction that if the Doctor wasn't an alien, almost anybody in his position would have that similar reaction. Or at least that's how it often feels to me. Whereas one of the things I really appreciated about Matt Smith coming in after was his responses to things was often like, wait, what? In a way that felt more off kilter. So like one of the moments for Tennant that did have that different, more alien reaction that happened early on, but felt like something that happened so infrequently. So in Tooth and Claw, when he first sees the werewolf, like everyone's screaming and running, and he just looks and goes, "Oh, you're beautiful." I'm like, I love that. But I feel like I got so little of that in his time. And again, I don't even, when I say he acts more human, I don't even mean that as an objective bad thing. It just has to do with my taste. And it logistically makes a ton of sense. There's a bajillion character and story justifications for why, because at this point he has been on, his Gallifrey is believed to be gone. He's been on Earth for a while. He's really bonding with Rose. It makes sense that he would go native at least a little bit. So like, I get it. It's fine. It's just not as much for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us.
Like I know we've actually kind of hit the amount of time we set aside, but it's just very funny to me that like after I make the case for David Tennant not being that good, it's like, okay, this interview's over. All right.
No.
I know. I found that very funny.
Well, actually, one final thing we need to. I said with Geek Out, we have two things. Have you watched The Expanse?
I have not. My friend,
you really should, because it's one sci-fi series. I haven't just thought about the fiction; they've thought about the science. In other words, you could actually, it's believable.
I've heard nothing but good things. My friend Jessie, who has her own YouTube channel, Jessie Gender, she loves that show. She swears by it. For me, the issue is time. I don't have it. Like I've got a backlog of work. It's one of those things. It's on the list of shows that if and when I ever catch up on the stuff that I've been trying to get done forever, maybe I'll try and get to that. But the issue is time, and that there is never enough.
Well, I think it's brilliant. Anyways, and the other thing, we should have had more time to discuss this, but I'm going to have to bring up Joanna. You were a Harry Potter fan, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. I used to have Harry Potter stuff up on the shelf. When I would talk about Harry Potter, I would wear my Slytherin gear because that was my house. It still is my house. I mean, but the thing about J.K. Rowling is that it's not just a thing she said. It's a thing that she keeps doing and has made it clear that this is going to be a fundamental aspect of who she has decided she's going to be going forward. That's not to say that she could never change. Maybe she will. But at this point, she has really dug in her heels on her positions and her beliefs about trans people and parroting a lot of very harmful, misinformed views. And I hope I hope that I can be done making videos on her. It kind of bums me out that the videos I made talking about her were the most viewed videos I had in all of last year. It kind of annoys me that stuff that I wish I didn't have to talk about, or I mean, I don't have to, I set my own schedule, but like, I wish stuff that I didn't feel the need to somehow address, but really don't want to. I wish that wasn't my best performing stuff, but it,
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I don't know if you still got it up on your channel, but I do remember we were going to record this last year, and that all blew up. And you put out a video a few days after we were due to talk, and you were visibly upset. I could see that, and so you know, I mean, look, I'm a complete philistine when it comes to Harry Potter. Never read any of the books, never seen any of the films. You know, it just passed me by. But one thing I do remember was JK, related to JK Rowling. So I was bored one night. It was BBC box sets. Oh, there's this detective series called Strike. Okay, I'll watch the first episode. Oh, this is quite good. It's very dark, very gritty, kind of my kind of thing. I'll watch another episode. Reading the credits. Executive producer J.K. Rowling. Of course, it was based on her detective series, wasn't it? A series of novels, wasn't it? So that was it. Switched off.
yeah.
I'm not going to watch anything which, you know, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, and that's
people say, oh, JK is getting cancelled. Well, no, she never shuts the fuck up about all that transphobic bullshit.
I mean, like it could be a whole. It's always amazing to me when people go on, you know, massive networks or these huge platforms that they have to talk about getting canceled. I'm like, really? The fact that you have the platform you have to even say that kind of proves that you're not.
Well, I'll leave you on this, right? So after Gina Carano was fired by Walt Disney, right, you had all the far right people say, oh, this is council culture. And with no sense of irony, they were tweeting hashtag cancel Disney Plus.
Yeah. That, oh boy, that was so weird to me. Like, yeah. Here's the thing where ultimately where I've had to end up with Rowling. It's, I for myself have had to pack away my Harry Potter stuff because it doesn't make me feel good anymore. But for anyone who already has those things and did already have them before we knew what we now know about her, I wouldn't tell anyone that they have to get rid of their Harry Potter stuff. If it still brings you fulfillment, if you still get joy out of the wholesome aspects of that fan community or all the rest of that, I hope you can hold on to that for as long as possible. I will say that anyone who objects to her views needs to not be spending money on anything that raises on anything new that raises the profile of her or her ability to do things, because she's made it clear this isn't something she's going to say once, something she's going to keep doing. So any money you send towards her or any building of her profile that happens as a result of lots of people seeing the next Fantastic Beasts movie or buying whatever, you know, new novel she writes under whatever pen name, it raises her influence and her ability to keep harming people. And, you know, like I said, anything you already had, you can keep that, and that is going to be your call for how you wish to engage with that in future. But I am going to push back on anyone who basically says, well, what difference does like my one ticket to this movie make? I'm like, it matters because every single ticket bought is another ounce of influence that she has, and she's hurting people. Right. She's causing direct, palpable, tangible harm with the things she is repeating.
Right. One final thing. You did a video about should cis actors play trans characters.
Right? Yes.
And you said there was a Bond girl. Well, she was on screen for 20 seconds. In For Your Eyes Only. Right? That's Caroline Cossey. I knew Caroline for a few years. She was a hero to me, you know, when I was growing up, you know. I saw her speak about trans stuff on television. It was like she was a hero to me. And many years later, I got to know her. And to be honest, there's a saying: never get close to your hero; they'll only disappoint you. And unfortunately, after knowing her for about 4 or 5 years, my well, basically, she's a bit of a cunt. to be absolutely blunt about it. But one thing I will say is, if you ever look, I take it you've seen Ashes to Ashes, the follow-up to Life on Mars.
Actually, I haven't. I'm familiar with it, but I haven't.
On Gene Hunt's wall, right, there's a poster promoting For Your Eyes Only. It's the legs poster promotion.
Yeah.
Those are Caroline's legs.
Oh.
Yeah,
that's kind of neat.
Little fact for you. Anyways, it was great that you joined me, and we must do this again. I'd love talking to you. You're such a sweet and lovely person.
Thank you.
All your relevant links will be down below when I post this video, hopefully Thursday. In the meantime, if you like this video, please share, please like, please leave a comment, and most importantly, please subscribe to this channel. That's the most important thing you can do for me right now. Thank you, Vera, and it's great talking to you.
Thanks for having me.